Pedersen from Denmark, and he is not only a researcher and fantastic knowledge, and he is one of these people who I really appreciate, who knows so much, but he is able to tell it so easy language. So when we made a study tour together, when from Netherlands invited us to the Netherlands about the Cold War heritage, I didn't understand many things, so I always came to Thomas, please tell me what was that. But he is even more. He researched 1,800 sites and objects in Denmark of the Cold War heritage, and out of those, 25 objects he suggested to save as a heritage for the Danish government, for the Danish people, and not only for Danish but for all the world to see. So he knows a lot, and we are really looking forward to what you tell us about your experience of the military heritage.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I've been looking very much forward to actually come to Latvia and hear about the status of the military heritage project. I've been following this project for the past couple of years, and it looks really good. And it looks a bit like also some initiatives we've been working with in Denmark with regards to the Cold War. Yes. First, a short introduction of myself. I was educated as a historian and a city planner. I've been working in the museum business for quite a long time. This is from one of my exhibitions about the Danish crusade to Estonia 800 years ago. That was made together with the Danish Queen, which is also an archaeologist. Sorry. Yes. But I started out as a museum curator and later museum chief. Sorry, what is? Right. Looks familiar, right? From the entrance hall down here. I was appointed director of an old arms museum, the Arsenal Museum in Copenhagen, the world's largest collection of arms, 60,000 arms, of which 14,000 were on display in the museum. No one had any interest in that, except for a few specialists. So I set a program in movement to transform this museum into a modern war museum, doing a lot of documentation of Denmark's participation in different wars, also in Afghanistan, and we brought this vehicle home from Afghanistan. It was hit by an IED, a mine. 3 of the people in the car were actually killed during this, and we took it home along with 10 tons of Afghan gravel to put it on display in the museum, and to make it more understandable the conditions that Danish soldiers were fighting under in Afghanistan. And as you can see, there was a lot of interest, but not very much respect about this display. Note the girl climbing up onto the vehicle, despite the fact that the main story here is that the 3 Danish soldiers were killed. The 4th soldier in the vehicle survived, and I'm here today. Anyway, that made me doubt on the traditional way of conveying history in traditional museums. I also work today as a concept developer for different museums, but also in city planning and in the transformation of historical sites, barracks, proving grounds, different places with military heritage, that has to be transformed into new history. Yes. So, Denmark, from a Cold War perspective, why is the Cold War interesting to Denmark? Well, very much because where Denmark is placed on the geographical map, at the cap, entering and leaving the Baltic Sea, the Warsaw Pact had 80% of all their shipping inside the Baltic Sea. So in case of a war, they had to pass through Danish waters, making the Danish country a very strategic, important place. And the Cold War was actually a real thing in Denmark every day. There were up to 25 observations of Warsaw Pact ships, Warsaw Pact aircraft in Danish territory every day during the Cold War. So it was very much present, but also very much unknown. Denmark worked together with NATO. Here are British soldiers training in a Danish town, training, patrolling the civilian city before being deployed to Northern Ireland in Denmark. And there were service people looking out for the Warsaw Pact, being prepared to go to war 24/7 every day from 1949 up until 1994. These people were actually sitting in their bunkers, controlling everything that happened in and around Denmark. And of course, we want to preserve some of these histories. But there were also different point of views and aspects about what was the Cold War actually about. How could we best preserve peace? These are two examples of how this worked within the population. A lot of people were soldiers. A lot of people were against war and members of the peace movement. But both sides were actually on their own way trying to work for keeping peace. And was there a right side or a wrong side in this? Perhaps not. But there were two sides, at least. What was important to me back in 2004 was to preserve sites from the Cold War in Denmark, because the Danish army was changing. The enemy was no longer the Warsaw Pact, but Afghanistan and Iraq. Danish soldiers were sent abroad, and some of these sites in Denmark were being sold, transformed, buildings demolished, and so on. So it was important to me, and I convinced the government to set progress of a large documentation program. As another so we documented more than 1,800 different sites all across Denmark, and pointed 25 main themes, each represented by a Cold War site that should be preserved in order to make it possible to convey this history for the future. Not all of these sites are big and spectacular. It might be just an ammunition bunker placed in a wood in a forest somewhere in Denmark. There were actually 800 of these ammunition bunkers built throughout Denmark in forests. Everyone knew they were there, but no one knew what was inside, what was the purpose of it. So it was, these sites were very present in the Danish landscape, but no one actually knew what they were supposed to. Nevertheless, more than 1 million, there are 6 million people living in Denmark. More than 1 million people in Denmark have been soldiers or in military or civilian service during the Cold War. They each have memories of the Cold War. They each have a perception of what the Cold War was all about, who the enemy was, and they have been the main responsible people for conveying the Cold War history for the future. So it is within a military framework, it is within a military perception of what the Cold War was. It's in a military language, and most sides that are being preserved are also military sides, reducing the conflict between East and West to a military thing. That is not necessarily the right way to do it. This is, by the way, General Alexander Haig speaking to Danish soldiers. He was the Defense Ministry Minister in the United States. That was right. Yes. This is the other side, the peace movement. They keep a very low profile in conveying their history and their viewpoints for the future. One of the main aspects there is that a large part of the Danish peace movement was actually members of different socialist parties, most of them actually actively supported by Moscow, and they're very silent today. They don't talk about their perceptions of the Cold War. They have not appointed places important to them, and we don't hear their voices. We're trying to get them to talk, get them to relay their viewpoints within the framework. And then there, of course, is the public perception of the Cold War. The Cold War is a story you remember, but you don't really know, because there was no war. But war marked also everyday life in Denmark. I've given an example here from 1983. What was popular, what was popular Danish culture at that time, and many of these things is actually about war. The 1983 American TV film The Day After was first shown in 1983, but also popular pop music like Elton John was singing about Cold War aspects, but also painting up this picture of what the Cold War is all about. We have the freedom of the West, and in the East, the Warsaw Pact, everything is cold and closed and gray, and while the sun is shining in the United States, and even the bad guys look good, the frontiers between East and West were very much drawn up. And this picture actually still stands today. This was actually generated using artificial intelligence. I went over to my neighbor's daughter, she's in the 8th grade, and asked her to prompt Midjourney with everything she knows about the Cold War. And this is what came out. The exact same picture as we had of the Cold War in the 1980s. Everything is gray, everything is wet and cold, and and makes a picture of Cold War and an illusion of the eastern part of Europe in a way that really hasn't changed. And this is because all the textbooks, all the memories that we bring forward to our kids is still the same picture. And we'd like to do something about that. Yes. Because then there is, of course, the other side. Almost a year ago, we published a large research article about the actual war plans of the Warsaw Pact. What were the plans? Was the Warsaw Pact going to attack NATO at any point? Yes. The Warsaw Pact would, and very heavily, using a lot of nuclear weapons. But the report didn't say why they would do that, and in which scenario this war would actually be declared. And NATO was just the same. In 2 months we will publish a new report showing the actual war plans of NATO, which was just as planned. In Denmark, in the northern region of NATO, we were prepared to use up to 300 nuclear devices on our own ground to keep out the Warsaw Pact. This was the reality, but we don't hear much about the Warsaw Pact plans and ideas. We still need museums that will convey the history of the Warsaw Pact, of the military preparedness of the Warsaw Pact, but no one's been willing to actually take up this step, and I think it will be an important addition to the museums found in the West. Because there were these concepts, and there were no doubt that we in NATO regarded the Warsaw Pact as an enemy. The first thing I've shown here is a report from the Danish Military Intelligence Service about the Warsaw Pact aggression possibilities against Danish territory. There's no doubt who the enemy would be. But also in the public propaganda, the threat to freedom, a picture story exposing communism, is actually an American school book. And even so, also the Soviet propaganda showing the capitalists of the West bringing the world into the nuclear abyss. This was the reality. But how do we actually convey these histories, stories and sites to the future? What I've learned so far is the importance of being aware of which history you want to convey to the public and why. There is no thing as a distant, neutral and non-biased story about the Cold War. It's an illusion. So you have to be honest with your public when conveying, these are my views on the Cold War. This is how we saw it back then, and as we partly also still see it. The poster here is actually an authentic poster sitting on a Danish Air Force radar, because Denmark wasn't that keen on being part of NATO, or some parts of Denmark wasn't, but still better both feet in NATO than a cold ass in Siberia. That was the motto. Yes. Also, there is the absence of history. There were not many shots fired during the Cold War. Many of these stories are far away. They are not known. Nothing really happened, and yet there was really something happening. And also the sites are disappearing. This is the last picture taken of the largest underground facility built in Denmark during the Cold War. Also the most expensive building ever built in Denmark. This site was more than 10 times as expensive as the Opera House in Copenhagen. It was extremely expensive. The NATO headquarters in Denmark. Today, this entrance has been filled up with concrete. Everything above ground is gone. This story, this site is lost forever, together with the knowledge about it, because it was so secret that I've been down there, but this is the only picture I have of this facility. I could not take pictures even up to the last day of the site's interior, and I still don't know what they actually did then. They didn't know either. Instead, I started up a museum in a Cold War fortress built in 1951 along the Danish coast for the Danish Navy to control all shipping through Danish straits. And this is a beautiful site because it has this special magic. You're taken underground in a world you really don't know, seeing something that you expected might exist. It's pure James Bond. Very few people were there during the Cold War, and you expected that something like this must have existed. And that's the what factor in conveying history. What is this? Why was this built? What was the purpose of this? Why was it manned 24/7 for more than 2 generations? Because the historic site has a certain magic, and you should work with that. And that's my main focus in conveying history. It should always start with the historic site. I've done that now in the Faroe Islands. We want to preserve this radar station from the Cold War, built by the Danish armed forces, manned by British armed forces, and today preserved not actually as a Cold War museum, but as a sustainable starting point for experiencing the nature and landscape of the Faroe Islands and the Northern Atlantic. So this will be preserved, but not as a Cold War site. That's the wow factor. And then there's the factor. Because when you tell the story about the site, you have caught the attention of your audience, and you can tell them what we think this is about. Here I am actually in a dialogue with the Danish foreign minister during the Cold War, during the last part of the Cold War, actually the first foreign minister to recognize Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in 1991. And I could tell him stories that he didn't know. Actually, behind us, there's the former chief of military intelligence in Denmark. I could tell him stories that he didn't know about this. And we had a conversation, and we have had a lot of conversations about the Cold War and what was actually going on. and what histories should be conveyed to the future. Regarding principles on conservation, I'm a purist. I want to keep the integrity of the site. Keep the site as it is. It is spectacular enough, even though it may be just a tower sitting, a watchtower sitting on the image on the border. What we did here is not only to preserve the tower, but also the double layer of fences and the so-called kill zone, the open area between the fences, because that's a part of the landscape. When you look at it, it's easily recognizable, and that's also an important part of picking the right places to communicate history, the communication ability. Is it easily understood what you're looking at? Then you have a good starting point for conveying history. Also, authenticity. Don't add something that doesn't belong there. You don't need to. Take what you have as a starting point. Yes, there are good and bad examples in Denmark of this. One good example of the principles of framing. How do you introduce your site and your story? Not only starting at the visit, but also on the website. What do you promise your audience? And you should be precise about what this site is about, what you're about to tell your audience, and you have to keep these promises. The other picture is from the Danish equivalent of the Gabnebunker. This was the Danish government, and this is all that can be seen from the outside. A small asphalt apron, an entrance into a 4,000 square meter large bunker hidden inside a small mountain, being exactly as it was during the Cold War. And we have preserved it in this way. But there are other ways to go around it. This is the two lower pictures are from another Cold War museum. What you see on the parking lot is a recreation, a fake of the Berlin Wall with a trabant driving through. But the setting is in the middle of a field on a small Danish island. It doesn't belong there. It makes a promise that the site cannot keep. And it goes on when you enter the inside, because the first thing you see after paying your ticket is a hot dog stand and a submarine emerging from a grass lawn. What's the purpose of this? Is this trustworthy? And actually, they are the best scientific Cold War experts in Denmark. But they make their own story unbelievable by a bad frame. And it gets even worse, because national sites of great importance has to be imposing. And this is from an archaeological project being realized in Denmark just now, the castle of Nyborg, where the Danish king met with the Danish nobility over a period of 500 years, is a very important site to Danish history, but it doesn't look like much. So a national, private foundation has decided to recreate the site, building the tower with an extra storage, so it becomes twice as large. Just in order to make the site more imposing. Don't ever do that. Don't take on the integrity of your site. Don't get your site to match your story. You can keep it small and clean. You can convey complex stories on the side of your historic site, like we've done at the government bunker, or you can use guided tours. Guided tours are always good because you have control over your audience. You know exactly who they are. You can tell an individual history story to each group that is perfect for each group. You don't have to secure anything because you can still see what your audience is doing. So the guided tour is another one when conveying history. But also your guides have to be precise. And you have to be precise on what are your guides and your reenactors actually doing. I don't use reenactors much. I've used them in Viking museums to give the audience a sensation of standing in front of attacking Vikings. This was Denmark's finest hour when we burned and plundered and raped the whole of Europe. And of course, an important national history. But they don't pretend to be Vikings. They stop in front of the audience and then they tell about what it was like, how. So it's only a demonstration, and as it is we convey the medieval history. These people do not pretend to be medieval people. They are there as guides and presenters in a historic atmosphere. These guys I would even comment on. The people meeting every weekend to dress up in Soviet and East German uniforms because they have a passion for driving around in Trams and so on. This is not a reflective way of conveying a very complex history to the public. And of course there are children and the next generation, because we have a history where nothing actually took place. It's very hard to convey this history. But a few years ago we got a grant from a national grant of €1 million to develop a school service about the Cold War. And what we did was to make individual programs for each different class for the beginner classes, 1st to 4th grade. And it's not about the Cold War, it's about enemies and allies, with examples from the Cold War. And what we do is that we don't actually invite them into the museum because you can't go to the other end of the country with the school children. We send this instruction material out to the students and instruct them to go into the basement of the school. There's probably a Cold War shelter hidden in the basement, and that's a magical site for them as well. So we developed this program and distributed it to all schools in Denmark to prevent this. Kids playing war, dressed as East German soldiers. That's no way of bringing a new generation for, again, a very complex history. So we keep it simple when conveying the Cold War, taking a starting point in the historic site and the authenticity and the trustworthiness of and the magic of being there, of being in the actual place where history took place. And we are under attack. As I mentioned artificial intelligence earlier, this was actually, this is the Christmas battles, a photo from the Christmas battles, but it's generated by artificial intelligence. By simply feeding the entire text of the battle from the military heritage site into Midjourney and asking it to generate a photo, and this might pass. And this is just the beginning. We are under pressure from artificial intelligence, from fake news, from other undocumented types of history and storytelling. So to sum up just a few things, the historic site is magical. Share this magic with your audience. And every site is magical. You just have to unfold its story. Trustworthiness is the strongest asset of the historic site. You're in this site where actions actually took place. And be true to your historic site. Only make the most necessary changes. Don't let it represent stories that doesn't belong there. It's better to send people off to another museum to see another aspect of the Cold War than trying to convey everything yourself. And that is why this cooperation between museums in all parts of Europe is so very important. I'd much rather send my audience off to experience another part of the Cold War history by going to Latvia or Estonia or Lithuania or Poland, making it much more trustworthy, making it much more authentic. And remember, the site may represent other stories than your own, and other aspects of the Cold War than you thought. Be honest about your views and stories when you represent as a storyteller and a host. Remember, you are not the main attraction. Your story is, and your science. And use reenactment with caution for illustration and explanation, and not just factual, or to create a wow. The wow is in your side, and so it should be. You are guide to history, you're not reinventing it. So, again, we are under attack from new technology, but we have something in our historical site that is unbeatable. These places are where history actually took place. Let's stop. So, any questions so far?
First from the audience, do you have a question? Then we have some questions in the Slido. There are several, but we maybe skip the Trump question. And there are also questions on the...
So, good morning. The question is, I guess, that would be the same one. Is the topic of Russia's war in Ukraine currently integrated into Danish school programs? And the second part, I guess, of that same question is, what do young Danish people think about the war in Europe in the 21st century?
So answer the first question about Ukraine. It takes up very much interest in Denmark, in schools as well. What we try to do is to separate the war in Ukraine from the Cold War. It's two different countries. We cannot use the traditional enemy pictures painted by the Cold War. We have learned from the Cold War, but these are two different countries. And that's very important for school children also to understand. It's a different context. It's a different goal with the Cold War. For the second part, war is somewhat important for schools in Denmark. There hasn't really been war in Denmark. The Second World War, Denmark was occupied by Germany, but actually more people were killed in traffic during the occupation years than were actually killed by the Germans. So Denmark hasn't been that touched by war in the 20th century, but still it has taken up everyday life, everyday society, and we who experience the Cold War, we have given our knowledge and our perceptions, we bring them onto the new generation, so it will keep be very interesting. And kids have a lot of questions about war. They actually are afraid of war, and we have to address that by calming them down, but also explaining what is war, what does it entail, why do wars start, how do we end them, and how should we perceive our enemies. I think that is an important point coming from the Cold War that luckily ended without being war.
Yes. Thomas, thank you very much. I think that was something to remember, to learn, and remember that we will have presentations in our email, so we can take it up